Hello and welcome to the Schola Progenium. Today I'm going to be teaching you how to defeat the Imperial Guard, also known as the Astra Militarum, in 8th edition. Now, I love the Imperial Guard, and really who couldn't? They represent me and you, the everyday person, but out there in the 40k universe, facing off against just a whole host of terrors that exist out there, just trying to defend the glory of the Emperor. You know, you've got your Tyranids, you've got your high-tech aliens, you've got your demons, and a whole sort of variety of nightmarish beings out there just trying to destroy the Imperium. And this is just the everyday man or woman with a las rifle, a bayonet, and a trusty copy of the Guardsman Imperial Primer. And they have to resist all this and see all of this and face off against it, and just imagine that sort of experience. And you know, when you see these guys playing on the battlefield, when you're playing against the Imperial Guard, or if you are playing with the Imperial Guard, you know, that's what you're representing. And for me, that is absolutely awesome. But having said that, today I'm going to teach you how to defeat them. Now, Guard are very easy to overcome if you know what you're doing. Now, who am I to say this? Sort of, how can you trust me and what I'm saying? Well, my main opponent, my brother, who I must play on average at least once a fortnight and have done for at least 15 years on a casual basis, and at least 5 or 6 years we've been playing on a sort of tournament competitive level, and we understand tournaments. We've been playing, you know, with tournament level lists against each other, as well as a variety of fluffy lists. And, you know, I will go win for win against my brother. It's 50-50. And he has his own channel, Mordian Glory. And if you're a Guardsman player, or if you want to find out more about the Guard, then I would definitely check him out. And I'll include a link in the description, because his channel is absolutely the go-to place for Imperial Guard on YouTube, in my opinion. And, you know, I've been going against him and defeating him, and we just go back and forth, and we play against each other. And again, in tournaments, I have probably not, well, I know I have not lost a game single-handedly on a proper tournament level against a Guard list since 6th edition. And against any casual pickup game or any Guard player that I go against, I win every time. And that sounds like a big boast, but genuinely, I'm not arrogant. That is just the case, because I understand the Guard. And today, I'm going to be teaching you all the secrets that I've learned, so that you can go out there and any pickup game, any game you turn up and face off against the Guard, you should be able to beat them pretty much every time. Because you will understand how to beat the Guard better than almost the Guard player understands their own army. So without much further ado, I'll get started on the video. And as usual, I'll break this video down into simple chunks and then go into more detail on those chunks. The first chunk I'll talk about will be the orders game. And that's not just about killing off characters. You will kill off characters later in the game, but early on, you need to be playing the orders game in a different way. And I'll teach you that. I'll also teach you about the importance of trimming the fat, and I'll go into that in more detail. And then I will talk about splitting your game into 2 phases and using 2 very different and very distinct strategies for both of those phases. So without further ado, what do I mean when I talk about the orders game? So when I talk about disruption of orders, what am I talking about? Because I said the key wasn't to kill officers. Now, you can kill officers, and we will kill officers in a later stage of the game. But early on, when you're disrupting orders, the key is not to kill the officers. The key is to understand what the opponent is going to want to do with their orders, and force them to use their orders to do something else to recover from a situation you've put them in. So the Guard can use their orders to quite easily push a unit up to 20 inches plus with a decent advance roll in combination with the move order. And if you've got a unit that is holding an objective that isn't objective secured, they can quite easily get a unit onto that objective, even if it's quite a distance away from their main lines and suddenly snatch and grab a unit off you, turn the face of the game, and put you in a really bad spot where you've got to take that unit back off them, or fight the guard off, and they'll bring reinforcements in, and all of a sudden you're overwhelmed, and they've changed the face of the game. Likewise, you could be dropping in on an assault, and they will use their orders to strafe you down with massive amounts of rapid fire and rerolling ones on their special weapons. So what you're going to do? What you're going to do is you're going to really get in their face. You need to really push them back so that you are operating with your main lines at the absolute minimum in the midfield. Even if you are an army that generally would hang back, you need to, as a whole, in general, push the majority of your forces, your army, but within reason, the majority of your forces up to the midfield and be dominating that midfield. And then further to that, you need to be supporting your assault with other non-assault units in order to tie up, guard, and prevent them from having all of the orders that they need to do what they want to do to repel your assault. So, even if you've got quite solid shooty units that you would normally hang back, you need to push them forward, because you may need to support an assaulting unit by charging that unit in also. Now, I know what you're thinking. I don't want to charge my Stern Guard that normally hop out of a Rhino or my Fire Warriors or whatever into a unit of Guardsmen. That seems like insanity. But believe me, if you can work out how many orders, how many officers they've got, and how many orders they have available to boost their shooting, you need to effectively tie up that many units when you're in their face to totally degrade their shooting. Because what you've done is stage one, you've got in their face. So they think, right, my strategy, what I'm going to do to adapt to this is I'm going to boost my shooting ability. That's what they would do in response to a unit getting up close. They're going to boost their rapid fire, they're going to boost their reroll ones. So what you're going to then do is prevent them from using those orders, so that the orders that they would ideally use in the situation they're in, they are to change the face of the game, they are no longer able to do. And you will use, say they've got sort of enough orders to go around for 6 or 8 units. What you're going to need to do is, say you've got your assault units there, you're going to get your assault units in, and you're going to try and tie up multiple units, and not necessarily, if your units are survivable enough, not necessarily worry about being overwhelmed. Likewise, units that, I'm not talking about units that are totally dedicated to shooting. I'm not talking about getting silly with this, but units that would prefer to shoot but are more than capable of handling themselves against a guardsman unit in close combat, which is, let's face it, terrible. Unless they've got a priest and masses of men and are hugely overwhelming you, and have rerolls from the priest, as I mentioned, they're not really going to do anything. They're going to bounce off you. Now, what does that say they're going to want to do? They're going to want to pull out and shoot. So they can, because they're going to want to shoot you because you're in their face. And what you're going to force them to do is attack them with multiple units, so that you're tying up their orders, so that officers, instead of saying, right, this unit with the plasma and the missile launcher is going to rapid fire or reroll ones, I'm going to instead have to use that order to just pull out and shoot. And guard squad shooting without orders are, let's face it, mediocre to poor at best. So immediately you force their hand, you put them in a position where they need to use a certain set of orders, and then you've not allowed them to use that set of orders. So they are desperately, instead of adapting and putting themselves to the advantage, as I said, they're having to use their adaptability just to regain ground, just to stay treading water. Now, likewise, I mentioned also that, they can move and get units all over the place. So what I'm going to talk about now is the second stage of the game, which is, not the second stage of the game, sorry, we'll talk about phases of the game later. What I'm going to talk about now is the importance of trimming the fat. So when I talk about trimming the fat, I talk about opportunistically killing as many guard models as possible in the early phases of the game in order to set yourself up for your second strategy, which I'll talk about later. So, whilst you're disrupting their orders and getting in their face, but then not allowing them to actually use their orders to dominate the close, short-range firefight, well, you're not doing a full mass assault. You'll have many units that are in their face, but not actually engaged in close combat. Likewise, as I said, a lot of their units will pull out and shoot, which means that will free you up. You can assault with a shooter unit, but then still are able to shoot with it in your shooting phase because it won't be tied up if they're going to pull it out from combat. You don't want to charge a unit in that's well away from orders that can't be ordered to pull out, because then they may well think, well, that's a shooter unit, my guardsman's just a guardsman unit, so I'll leave them tied up. So you want to avoid that. So you want to be tying up, make sure that you're using that disruption of orders in the vicinity of the officers. Don't be just randomly assaulting units and tying them up for no reason when it's not going to affect the orders game. And whilst you're doing this, you're trimming the fat. So what you're doing is, with your other units, your shooting units, your heavy bolters, your assault cannons, and all the stuff that just isn't really getting involved in the combat, but it's just like in their face. And what you're doing is you're looking at the opponent and you're seeing what is exposed. So your close combat isn't all about killing off as many units as possible. It's just about, your assault units are going to kill as many units as possible, but a lot of units they're not trying to kill off guardsmen in combat, they're just trying to tie them up. But the guardsmen that aren't tied up, which there'll be many squads that aren't tied up, a lot of them, some will be in cover, but some of them won't. And even if the ones that are in cover are right in the middle of the firefight, they're in rapid fire range of you, they're in cover and they're on objective, so there's a million reasons to shoot at them. If there's a guardsman unit that's 20 inches away, but just out in the open, you shoot the unit out in the open, because ultimately you're disrupting them in the close game. And then anyone that's just spread around, that's just an opportunistic target, that's where you kill them off. That's what you're murdering away. And it's really, really important to just kill off as many guardsmen, infantrymen, and steadily trim away at their heavy armor. Now, the good thing about their heavy armor is if you're in their face, a simple guard tank can be tied up by any unit basically in the 40k universe and just be ruined for the game. Because even a Lima Russa only has a 10-inch move, so if you can get in its face even with a tactical marine unit and charge it, you will probably survive the Overwatch. Don't worry about that. They're almost definitely not going to hit you with anything. They might kill a couple of guys. But if you're really in their face and you can get a unit forward and tie them up, they're not going to shoot in the next turn. They'll pull back, you'll charge them again, pull back, charge them again, and you've just tied that tank up. It's ruined for the game. And you can do that with a lot of their armour. And the armour that you're not tying up is the armour that you're just picking away at, and you're just slowly, over the course of the game, destroying their armour. Whether they've got a lot of armour or a little armour, you're just destroying what you're not tying up. And if they've not got that much armour, you don't have to go out of your way to tie up the armour. Just, fight the artillery duel as you would and focus on tying up the guardsman units. If they've got loads and loads of armour and not that much guardsman units, then basically the same rule applies as before, just tying up as many tanks as possible, because once they're tied up, they're just ruined for the game. And the key to trimming the fat is that you are trying to remove as much of the guard's ability to control the board in the late game. Because this game against the guard is played in two phases. You've got the first brutal phase. The first is of 3 turns, maybe 4 turns. But particularly the first 3 turns where you're right in each other's faces, you're assaulting back and forth, you're shooting at each other at point blank range, and you're really trying to kill off as many guardsmen as possible, and they're just desperately pulling out and shooting, and you're taking fire at close range, so you're taking a fair bit of damage in return as well, but you're not getting totally overwhelmed because of the tactics that I've discussed. So then you're going to switch phase and you're going to switch to a different strategy, and that's what I'm going to talk about now. So you've had this brutal firefight and you've taken some serious losses, but the guard have paid a heavy price in return, and they've got scattered units, and because you've been focusing on just always removing the easiest models, they may have a variety of units that are either um, sort of two or three guardsmen here and there, or you may have managed to totally remove whole units and they've just got a few units in cover, maybe still supported by officers. Like this is where you're going to totally switch strategy. Now, the thing you need to understand in this late phase of the game is that unless you are very aware of what you're doing, no objective is safe. Because move, move, move is such a powerful ability that any officer, he can even do it on himself, can cause a guardsman unit to advance across the board. They get an extra, I don't know how they do it, I don't know the specific rules off the top of my head, but I think they effectively get like 6 inches plus an advance. They get a full extra move plus advance on top of a move and advance. So, they can get 6 inches plus 3 to 4, and then 6 inches plus 3 to 4. I think that's how it works. So they're getting, around 20 inches across the battlefield, which means, most of your objectives, if you're, in their face, you're in the midfield, a lot of your objectives are not safe from the guard because they'll be able to run onto them with potentially multiple OBSEC units. And if they've got 2 full-strength 10-man guardsman units, even if you've got an OBSEC unit's quite secure on objective, they can run 20 men on with support from their remaining, fire support units, damage your unit, and then, take control of it. And if it's the last phase, the last turn of the game, or, turn 5, there's a good chance you will not get that objective back, and you will not get enough OBSEC units onto that objective to win it. They'll just overwhelm you, OBSEC versus OBSEC. It doesn't matter. So you need to be aware that they can do this, and then you need to prevent it. So the strategy is as follows. You have trimmed the fat, you have reduced them as much as possible. Now you need to observe, and you need to see where are the objectives in your backlines, in the midfield, in their backlines, their deployment phase, or deployment zone or nearby area, and where the focus of the fight is. So if you fought really hard in a certain area and you've got control of an objective, maintain control of that objective. Brilliant, well done. Keep fighting that fight. But the majority of your units at this point are probably going to redeploy. Now, why is this? Well, what you're going to do is you are going to you're going to assess where guardsman units are, which units are most easy to wipe out, and where those units were what objectives those units were directly threatening. Therefore, you can pull your units back or sideways or forwards and move those units wherever the battlefield has gone. You can move your units onto objectives over turn 4 and 5. And as you move your units onto those objectives, you look at what guardsman units are sort of within 20 inches of those objectives and are most easily killable, and you destroy those units, and you've picked the objectives that you're moving onto based on the control that you already have of them, or how easy the guardsman units are to kill that are near those objectives. So you've got 2 objectives you could potentially move on to, and one objective has a 10-man guardsman unit within 20 inches, and the other objective has, a couple of 4-man guardsman units within 20 inches of it. Go for that unit and kill off the 2 4-man guardsman units, or whatever it may be, whatever you can most easily kill with your resources. It sounds complicated, but it's actually very simple to do on the battlefield because you've maintained control of the sort of midsection and, probably your back lines as well. They may have flanked a unit round potentially, but you can divert forces to deal with that, or just let them have that objective. If they've taken one of your back objectives, just let them have it. And, if you've taken one, and push onto one of theirs. Essentially what you've done is you've redeployed your units just in such a way, it doesn't matter what objectives you fought for in the past, if you're not going to reasonably able to hold those objectives, pull back onto a different one that you can easily kill any guardsman units that could potentially move onto it. Because, you're playing on a 6x4 battlefield, you're probably going to have, on average, around 4 objectives on the battlefield. It's very easy to leave the guardsmen with one objective that they control and then pull, you've got one objective that you solidly control and then pull back onto another one, stop them having another one, or control 2 other ones and prevent them from getting near it. The good thing about this is also that if you've drawn them into this sort of close firefight where they've got lots of men near you and you've got lots of men near them, if you can pull out and redeploy, although they can move, they have to rely on orders to do this. And this is the time to kill officers, which is brilliant, because now they don't have enough units to both control the objectives and just willy-nilly sling a couple of guardsman units here and there around every officer to protect him. Those officers will be exposed. They may have guardsmen in front of them, but it's easy to move around those guardsmen, attack them from behind. It may be easy to move a 5-man assault marine squad with jetpacks and chainswords just near the officer, get round a unit and assault him. There's a variety of ways you can pick guardsman officers off. And they're 30 points a guardsman officer, or 35 points. And, it shows in close combat. They are absolutely terrible. Even if they've got power sword, you don't really have to worry. If they've got power fist, that can be quite entertaining, if a guardsman manages to, wallop somebody with a power fist. But generally speaking, a guardsman officer is not much of a threat to any of your decent assault units. So, in the first phase of the game, your assault units will have been fighting a hard fight, taking some heads, and will have taken quite a big focus of firepower in return, and will be quite battered. So at this point, the best thing you can probably do with them is, instead of throwing them again into the fray, smashing into their most strong objective and trying to take an objective off them, what you might want to do is opportunistically pick off an officer near some guardsman squads that could move onto an objective. So you can move one of your units onto an objective. You can sort of look at the battlefield and go, right, I can use one of my units to get onto that objective. And there's a couple of guardsman squads that could potentially move because of the officer that they're with. So what I'll do is I'll kill the officer. They'll never get onto that objective. So you are combining this late phase assassination spurt with your remaining assault units and any opportunistic kills you can get in close combat against guard officers, because you've trimmed the fat and set yourself up for this, and you're also redeploying to make the best use of knowing where the guard will be able to redeploy and stopping them from doing that. So in summary, the best way to beat guard is to put them in a position where they would ideally use a certain set of orders to counteract what you have done. Then you prevent them from using those orders, so they cannot counteract what you have done. Whether that is in the early phase, where you are getting in their face, so they would ideally shoot you up and strafe you up in close combat, and you prevent them from doing that to the maximum efficiency, or whether it's in the late phase of the game, where you are pulling and redeploying whatever objectives you've initially fought for. Even if you fought really hard for an objective, you may consider pulling off it, because what you'll be doing is you'll be redeploying onto objectives and then disrupting their orders by either targeting easy-to-kill infantry units or by targeting officers with opportunistic assassinations, so they cannot counteract your redeployment, so you control the majority of the board and the majority of the objectives at the end of the game. So, if you can do that, and throughout your games against guard, keep that ideal at the forefront of your mind, you will defeat the guard in the majority of the games that you play against them. So thank you very much for your time. This has been the Schola Progenium. Goodbye.